Welcome to Throwback Thursday, where we bring you a homeopathy hangout episode from our archives in case you missed it first time round. Because this episode may be a couple years old by the time you hear it as a throwback, some of the special offers, links, or content may not be valid anymore, so please keep this in mind when listening. You're always welcome to reach out to us at info@eugeniekruger.com. Enjoy the episode. Today's guest is the absolutely lovely Veda Austin from New Zealand. She is a water researcher, public speaker, mother, artist, and author, and she has dedicated the last 8 years observing and photographing the life of water. She believes that water is fluid intelligence, observing itself through every living organism on the planet and in the universe. Her primary focus is photographing water in its state of creation, which is the space between liquid and ice. It is through her remarkable crystallographic photos that water reveals its awareness of not only creation, but thought and intention through imagery. I was very excited to have her on the show because, as most of you will know, we're still grappling to understand the mechanism by which homeopathy works. And one of the hypotheses is that our homeopathic remedies are able to retain the memory of the original substance which the remedy is made from, even though there are only infinitesimally small amounts of the substance present. So Veda has some wonderful courses on her website which will teach you how to use this technique for yourself, and you can check out her website at vedaaustin.com or check the show notes. Thanks so much for listening.
Welcome to the Homeopathy Hangout, where we discuss all things homeopathy from around the world. And now my mum and your host, Eugenie Kruger.
Hello, homies, and a very warm welcome to Homeopathy Hangout. Today, we get to speak with fellow Kiwi, Veda Austin from New Zealand. Welcome, Veda.
It's so nice to actually hear another Kiwi accent on podcast. I don't even know. I think I've only been interviewed by one other Kiwi, so it's really lovely.
Well, I'm glad that you think I still have a Kiwi accent because I don't really want the Aussie accent to creep in too much. My kids, because we've been here 6 years now, my kids are very much having that Aussie twang.
It's so funny. I've traveled so much and so many people can't distinguish the accents, but New Zealanders and Australians always can.
Yeah, and the classic is the fish and chips and fish and chops.
So true.
So Veda is I don't know what we call you, like a magic fairy spirit queen of water. And I'm sure most people that listen to the podcast are going to recognize your name instantly because it's been all over Facebook and social media, and everyone's been talking about the incredible things that you're doing with water. And so I'm very excited about it. I often say my favorite movie of all time is Frozen 2. Have you watched it yet?
I have children, and so yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah. What did you think of it?
Well, the bit I enjoyed is that they talked about water having memory. So
yeah, that's the part that I always say it's a movie about homeopathy. It's all about water has memory. Now, the way that I discovered you is that there was this Facebook post that you did on homeopathic remedies that you put in water, and then you use your special technique to freeze it. And then you took photos of that. And then I was like, who is this Veda lady? And clearly I have been living under a rock because it seems that everybody else has already known about you. I was just late to the party. But then I found all this other incredible work that you have done. So maybe can you tell us, Veda, how did you get into this in the first place? And how did you get interested in homeopathy? So I'm just going to throw it out there and sit back. You just go for
it. Sure. Well, there's a lot to unpack here, but I guess we'll try and simplify it. So around about 9 years ago, I started really on this journey I was very inquisitive about whether water could store information or not. So I had looked into various different researchers' work, and most people have heard of Masaru Emoto if they've been interested in water. Unfortunately, the scientific community really slammed him, and that was because he chose the best photos to show. So they took a lot of photos and they chose the best ones, and he never hid that. He wasn't doing anything wrong at all, but science has sometimes struggled also with being able to really look into the subtle sciences, the subtle nature of the way things work sometimes. But pictures speak 1,000 words. And so many people were able to suddenly identify themselves as bodies of water, sensitive to thoughts and environment and music and sound and all these different kinds of things. And his work was just so pioneering in the way in which it reached so many people by really just a handful of photos. And the next person who really inspired me, his name is Laurent Costa. He's become a friend of mine. He's a French microscopic photographer. He took photos in a similar way to Masaru Emoto, but for him, he never experimented. He never went in with the intention of experimenting on water, because to him, water was his spiritual teacher. He believed that water was really alive and had the ability to communicate. And I'm very much in that same line of feeling and thinking with water, more so than ever now after having researched and studied and observed water for 9 years. And so what Laurent would do was that prior to freezing, so they would take a small amount of water after it was exposed to something, flash freeze it, and take a photo of it under the microscope. Sometimes he would smile at the water before he took the photo, and he was getting amazing imagery of smiley faces microscopically taken, in the water. So he was seeing these little smiley faces, he was seeing hearts, he was seeing fish, he was seeing little cats, like actual pictures rather than geometries like Emoto was seeing. And so that inspired me greatly, because for many years I worked professionally as an oil painter. So I see the world from a very artistic perspective. But I have a threefold approach to my work. A scientific one, because I'm very interested in science as well, and all the different types of sciences. But I'm also an artist by nature. And so it's science, art, and consciousness. And I think there is a beautiful interweave there. And I think that actually more and more now we venture into quantum physics, we're able to start bringing in these kind of other subtle areas which haven't been explained before, which suddenly that suddenly makes some sense. So I'm really happy about that. And the third person was a man by the name of Thomas Hieronymus. He was a radionic engineer, and he made this interesting observation. He went into a Parisian meat market, and he noticed that the freshly placed organs of an animal appeared to be affecting the way the frost froze on the glass behind where they were placed. For example, the frost would freeze into the shape of a liver organ above a liver organ, and so on and so forth. And his hypothesis was that there seemed to be some kind of life force energy still emanating out of the organ, and he put that down to there being water in the blood. And he believed that each organ held a signature pattern of itself within the water. And that blueprint or signature pattern had information. Anything that with any kind of pattern or movement has information, and that information was shared to the water in the air, which was very, very cold, and that then froze into the blueprint shape of the organ. And that really interested me, because he was seeing this with his naked eye. And back then, 9 years ago, I didn't have a microscope, but I had an inquisitive mind. And I always say, don't believe everything you read or hear. If you can try it for yourself, I encourage people to do that. And so I had a glass petri dish from some other things I was doing, and I had some spring water. And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to project a thought into the water. I'm going to stick it in the freezer, because the whole kind of focus of all three of those people had been around the freezing. It's where the unseen becomes seen. And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to stick it in the freezer. I'm going to see what happens. I had absolutely no attachment to the outcome, or really didn't know. I didn't know if anything would happen at all. So I stuck it in the freezer with the peas and the broccoli and the ice cream and the stuff. And I left it there for hours. And then I came back, I pulled it out of the freezer, I held it up to the light, and I took a photo on my iPhone. And that photo that I took has launched 36,000 photos of water responding in an intelligent manner. So pictures do speak louder than words. So I thought I would show you some of this and just take you on a tiny journey, and then we'll skip over into why I'm interested in homeopathy and the work that I've done with homeopathy.
Yes, please. Amazing. I'm just sitting here like hanging on every word you're saying.
You're so sweet. Okay, so let's do this one first.
And for our podcast listeners, you're going to have to hop on the YouTube channel if you want to see the visuals. But obviously, if you're driving or anything like that, please don't.
No.
Wait till you use.
Can you see this okay?
Beautiful.
Okay. So this is just an example of Emoto's work, just for anyone that somehow has missed his work. It was very contrasting. You can see beautiful geometries from the word thank you to very little structure with the words you fall. It does show the power of words. I've actually discovered over time that water doesn't read words, it reads the energy of words. So this is the work of my friend Laurent Costa that I was talking about. You can see
the smiley face.
Yeah. And look, it makes you smile when you see them.
Yeah, it does. It looks like a sloth, like a sloth smiling.
It does. That does actually look like that. And you can see the beautiful heart.
Oh.
Now, this is where what I did. So my idea, like I said, was that I was going to project a thought into the water. So what I did was I held the dish of water in my hand, and I noticed that there was a bit of fluff floating around in the dish. So I was like, oh my God, put my hand in to take the fluff out, consciously thinking, I wonder if my hand will have any impact on the water's quote unquote memory, because I didn't know if it was a real thing back then. So I stuck it in the freezer, pulled it out, held it up to the light, took a photo. This was the photo that I took. As you can see, it's an undeniable hand, but it isn't just any old hand. You might notice that these two fingers are slightly crooked. And I have inherited my mother's crooked fingers. Two fingers. So it wasn't just any hand, it was also my hand. Wow. And I have to say I was kind of freaked out when I first saw this, because it took up half of the dish. So to put it into perspective, my Petri dishes are between 9 and 10 centimeters dilated. It's like they're pregnant. In diameter. And
well, you are giving birth to this idea, so we can talk about dilation.
I've also the other day I was just talking to a whole lot of midwives, so I probably still in my mind about that. But no, so actually, so they're quite large dishes, and so half of that dish, so approximately 5 centimeters. So this is huge macroscopically to be able to see something so big. And, I was like, oh my God, I kind of could almost hardly believe it. Yeah. So I showed this photo to my son Rama, and I said, hey, Rama, what does this look like to you? And he had no idea what I'd done. Yeah. He said, it looks like a hand. It looks like a kind of creepy hand, Mum. And I'm like, I know. And then I'm like, okay, well, if any water is going to be informed, it would be the ocean. So I went and I collected some seawater, and I was almost hesitant to put it into the freezer, because I thought if I see anything relating to the ocean in the imagery, like if there is any imagery at all, then this means it's kind of a big deal. Yeah. So I did that. I pulled it out of the freezer and I took this photo. Now you can see that it's a feathery, different kind of texture, mainly because seawater freezes differently than fresh water. But you can see the outline of the fish and the tail,
see the fish,
the fins, the gill, and the perfectly round eye. And that is when my freezer became my most used household appliance, and I just went crazy with it. And within about a year, I really started to go deep into the new science of water, and there really is one about the fourth phase of water that Dr. Gerald Pollack talks about, and has written a book with the same name. And so we have a liquid, solid, gas, and then a type of gel or plasma. And that's the stage between molecular chaos and molecular order. Water in a cup, in a glass, is updating its information every trillionth of a second. As it slows down, as it begins to freeze, I observed that it freezes in layers. And that I call the space of creation. It's before it's a solid, before it's in like an ordered space. So it begins to design, in fact. So my technique evolved over time by that understanding. As you can see in these two images, they're very different. I look back at my work when I first began in the first year when I totally froze water, and I'm amazed that I got the images as clear as I did, because my technique now that I teach people, that lots of people now are starting to implement into their lives, it only takes approximately 5 minutes. It depends on your freezer. It does vary with different freezers. Different waters freeze at different times. Different temperatures freeze at different times as well. So there are those things, but around about 5 minutes. And I discovered my technique that I call collective molecular photography, which essentially means that I think all the water molecules, or the informed water molecules, are working as a kind of collective to design imagery that we can recognize. So there's an intelligence about this. And so what I started doing, because I was curious, like, what's happening in the freezer? My freezer wasn't see-through. So I was like, started opening the freezer door earlier and earlier and earlier. And after about 5 minutes, I discovered that, oh, look, there's this liquid on top, but I can see something's happening underneath it. What's going on in there? So I just out of curiosity, I pulled it out of the freezer. I held it up vertically, and the liquid drained away, and there was this incredible imagery in the ice. And it was so clear. It was a very fine layer. But what I was seeing was clarity I'd never seen before in ice. And I now call that the first freeze. Because if you look at ice, or water basically freezing for long enough, you'll notice that after about 15 to 18 minutes in a fairly new freezer that normally will do this, there will be two layers of ice that have formed. And in between those two layers will be liquid. But there will also be like icy scaffolding in between. Now, this technique is very much kind of like, the analogy I give is when I was a little girl and at school, the teacher gave me a piece of paper with a glue stick and said, okay, draw something with the glue stick, get some glitter, sprinkle it on, let some of that glitter stick to the glue, and then shake the rest of the glitter away. So your conscious expression, or whatever your conscious influence is prior to freezing, is the glue. The first freeze is the glitter that's stuck to the glue, and the rest of the liquid water is the glitter that falls away. Now, interestingly, when you actually have that, you tip that water away, if you tip it into another petri dish, you'll get a secondary layer of information. It's very, very interesting when you start. The more you do it, the more you learn. And I feel like I'm still learning every day. Now, as you can see, the difference between these two images, there is such clarity in the new technique compared to the old technique. There is colors that are able to come through because the ice is very thin, and you can play with the colors depending on where you take the photo in your house. And I take all of my photos on my iPhone. So it doesn't require some load of great big technology. All you really need to order is a petri dish and glass. I always use glass because glass is essentially made of silica. Silica is a crystal. Crystals store information, and it helps the water to store information for longer. Now, my son did this one. His name is Rama. He's kind of like the Hindu god Lord Rama. And we were talking about that and how Lord Rama always has a bow and arrow. So we were talking about bows and arrows, and so he projected a thought of an arrow into the water. He did this entire thing himself, including the photo, and you can see how clear it looks. Like the arrow head is metallic. It's incredible.
It does, yeah.
So this is the stage of my new technique where it's liquid and ice. You can kind of see what it looks like. And this is a really important piece, which I think all of this is relevant to the work in homeopathy, particularly this piece, I think. So it was coming up to a couple of years ago now, I was talking to an Indigenous American Indian woman, and she said that she had the ability to speak to bees. And she said that the bees, she would watch the hive for long, long periods of time. And a bee came out and communicated to her, however it did, that it didn't mind if she looked at the hive, but please don't look at the hive for too long, because her conscious expression was putting too much light into the hive. And so what that really fitted in with me was like, oh God, okay. So if my conscious expression is putting light towards where we focus it on, one of the qualities of the fourth phase of water is that it can absorb more light. The other qualities are it has a negative charge, which was a really important piece because healthy cells are negatively charged, and that it has a viscosity about it. Now, what's really relevant here is that I think that water has a light source, and that as it begins to freeze, it's actually the light. As you can see, I've captured here, this was taken in the freezer. I managed to catch these light, almost like light halos around the ice as it's just starting to come out and just starting to form. So actually, it's as if the design that occurs with the ice is, in fact, guided by light.
Yes.
It's the light that creates the pathway for the design.
Yeah.
Which is really, really interesting piece. Now, over the many years, I have seen so many incredible images in ice. And these aren't just images where you go, I think I can kind of make that out. Maybe it's this or maybe it's that. Dr. Jerry Pollack's actually become a friend and mentor of mine, and he encouraged me a few years ago to essentially put out a kind of study, or a questionnaire with 25 of my photos, and simply say, what does this look like to you for each one? So I gave it to people I knew to put it out on social media. So it wasn't coming from me. People didn't even know what they were looking at. And 298 people did the survey. And out of that lot, approximately 83 to 85% of people were able to recognize the images for what the influence was prior to freezing. And out of those images, there were 3 of them that 100% of people could recognize.
What were they?
The hand,
the
number 8, and a tree, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was very curious to see if water could pick up faces, like facial recognition. So I used people's photographs. So as you can see here, the photo of my friend Wendy is on the right. I placed my petri dish of water on top of her photo for 30 seconds. The reason I use 30 seconds is because I think it's not too long and not too short. It just seems like a good time. The more I've worked with water, I've developed a relationship with water whereby it's almost as if I don't need to use this protocol anymore. It's like it knows what I'm going to do before I do it. And so
it's a
very interesting thing that happens over time. But people also like protocol. So it's very helpful for people to have these kind of things. So you can see how it's designed her face and her features. Here someone asked me to use the photo of Sadhguru, and you can see that it's created his face.
Wow.
Here I've always been interested in ancient history and especially Roman and Greek and Egyptian history. So I used an old Roman coin, and you can see it's designed the face from the coin.
Psst, did you hear the news? If you're in Australia or New Zealand, you can now study to become a homeopath with me. That's right. I am bringing the Centre for Homeopathic Education's world-renowned training program that has been running for 28 years to Australasia. First intake starts in September. Check out episode 398 of my podcast or visit chehomeopathy.com.au for more information.
This is a good example of me over-freezing. So it's easy for me to sometimes over-freeze things or under-freeze things. It is moving piece sometimes using different kinds of water. I've used all different kinds of water, rainwater and tap water and spring water, and all these different kinds of waters. And I've managed to identify the signature pattern of specific waters, which I really encourage people to do. Because if you don't know the natural patterns of your water, you're not going to know when it's significantly changed. And you can see a difference. Like tap water can be improved by you putting the tap water into a bottle and holding it to your heart so that it's beside your actual heartbeat for a minute, and it can structurally transform. But if you didn't know what your tap water looked in the first place, you wouldn't really know it had made the structural change. It didn't make a chemical change, but it made a structural change. So what we're seeing is an energetic state of health, or like an emotional state of health. So bringing it back to this picture, you see I've overfrozen it, but you can still see the outline and the shape of this comparison to Jupiter, otherwise known as Zeus, of this
Interesting
statue.
that the eyes, you could definitely make out the eyes, and with that fish as well, the eye was just so perfect. It's almost creepy that it's the eye.
It is weird. Occasionally, I think it's where a bubble pops and it just creates this perfect hole.
Or is it? Because I heard you say once that if the eyes are the window to the soul, then the tears are the spirit, or something along those lines. So
I said that tears are an expression of spirit.
Expression of spirit. Have you frozen some teardrops yet?
Yes, I have. I share all of that in my advanced workshop. And I think I've also shared some on my social media pages. So if anyone wants to go through them, they'll find some that I've done of tears. But I've actually done different types of tears. So I've done tears that are chemical related, in the sense that, you're cutting an onion and you naturally cry. Yeah. But I've done tears of joy and sorrow and various different things as well. And I compare them to the ones that a scientist has done. I think she was a scientist, where she looked at tears, different emotional tears, under a microscope, and saw that they were different. So these are just examples of my work. I think it's nice for people to be able to have a look at them. For example, over here is a very obvious one where I put my thumb into the Petri dish prior to freezing. And what's interesting here, you can see, my nail and my thumb, but at the end of the nail, you can see there's a little chip. Yeah. Well, a few hours after I'd done this whole thing, I actually chipped my nail in exactly place. Yes. And I've seen things like that happen all the time, because I don't think water has any time
concept.
No, not in the same way that we do.
Yeah,
because it can show me information from 100 years ago, but I've seen it show me information that have actually occurred the next day. It's a very, very interesting thing. And if we consider that, I'm not talking about volume, but I'm talking about by molecular count, we're 99% water. And there are more water molecules in our bodies than stars in the Milky Way. So we have this body of water, and it's so intelligent. It has an intelligence far, far greater than we might have ever imagined. So as we just kind of go through some of these, this was an interesting one. There was a lady who was newly pregnant, and I asked her to take a sip of water and think of her baby. So I froze the rest of the water, and you can see the little embryo, the little baby is in there. The one below it was...
And it's got that light around it as well.
Yeah, I love it when it does that. That's a really beautiful point that nobody's really pointed out before about that. Yeah, that's really special. So with the one below it, it looks like an etching. So I had gone to a cafe, and they had left this bowl of water out for thirsty dogs. And I saw this Schnauzer dog, like in the comparison photo, drinking from the water. And I'm like, I wonder what water would show me, what about that dog. And so I asked the lady at the cafe, I know this is going to be the weirdest thing anyone's probably ever asked you, but could I please have a takeaway cup for that dog bowl water over there? She let me, and I showed her the photo the next day, and she was amazed. But I simply came home and froze it. And
it's interesting that once again that eye is just so, visible and so clear.
It is. The one in the middle is interesting because my daughter loves all kinds of animals, and she had a book on birds, different kinds of birds around the world. And so we opened the book up, and we got a piece of cardboard, and we covered the owl's face in half. So we put the cardboard down half the side of the owl's face. And so the water designed the other eye of the owl, which is fascinating because it actually wasn't seeing, if you want to use that term, or wasn't touching the actual picture. It was covered up, but it knew the intention, it knew the idea, and it was fascinating. And, there are so many examples. Here's where I've put broccoli into water and used the broccoli water, and you can see it's designed to the broccoli.
That movie poster is just, that's classic. That's amazing.
Batman. Well, because I have 3 children and my children have been grown up watching me do this, they have been very involved. And children do this better than most of us because they don't have the kind of cynical.
Yeah, and preconceived ideas. They're open to just whatever may be.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so my son would get really involved and he's like, maybe it would like to watch Batman with me. And he would literally put the Petri dish of water by the movie. And this is the result of that. It's quite remarkable, honestly, amazing to me. And here are just a few more examples. I mean, really, they tend to kind of go on and on. You can see the influence here where I put the amethyst crystal in the water. I removed it and it designed a pyramid. I think, no, that's that one. So I'll stop that share. And
I have a quick question for you, Veda. So Bruce Lipton in this one video, he said that because he's a huge fan of homeopathy, and there was this one interview that somebody did with him a few years ago, and he said that he believes the information of the original substance in the water, that information is transmitted through the hydrogen bonds between the water molecules. But I've mentioned that to one of the homeopaths I interviewed on the podcast, and they were saying, no, it's more like an energetic type thing, more so than the chemical action of the hydrogen molecules sending the information from once, like introducing the substance in the water at this end, but within milliseconds. It's because of the hydrogen bonds, that information is traveling all throughout the water. But what do you feel? How do you feel water is able to transmit?
I have a few theories. And the work that I do with water, when I'm working with water, I'm not really looking at it as so much hydrogen and oxygen. Although a nice analogy that I've shared before is that the energy of hydrogen, these 2 hydrogens, is feminine, and the energy of the oxygen is masculine. And together they create this beautiful balance. And so when I'm working in these fields, I've done a bit of research into the thought of our thoughts material. It's a very interesting question. And there were some studies done, and it does kind of come into this. And when I share my work about homeopathy and the work that I've already done, I want to share a little bit more about what I think is going on there. And after sharing the work, you'll have more of an idea of where my feeling and thoughts are with that. So I want to share, though, about the work of this scientist who I've been talking about recently, because it's just fascinating, and it does really make you wonder what is going on here. Because before telling you about him, I would say that I think that all things, my partner, he says this well, and he says, like, everything we see is information that we've labeled. So when I'm looking at my computer now and I'm looking at a picture of you, and rather than seeing it as the label, you could say, well, what does this thing mean to me? Everything has a type of information and energy. And so I think that those realms of intelligence, especially, I'm talking about in living things, there's an intelligence, an innate intelligence in all things. We can't just brush it with the human yardstick. There is intelligence in plants and mushrooms and in all other life forms. It's just different than ours. It's no less, it's just different. And so with that intelligence, there is an energy, or what I sometimes call spirit. It makes some people uncomfortable. And if you don't like the word spirit, then please use the word energy. It's kind of like with Einstein, he was really talking about a lot of things to do with that were spiritual, but instead the word consciousness might feel more comfortable. So they can interweave, how you makes you feel. However, I do think that anything that is living, has an intelligence, has a spirit. And that spirit, I believe, has the ability to share information and also observe it. So I've observed something with water where it's far more interested in my feelings than my thoughts. And I think of thoughts like clouds, but I think we're really the sky. And our thoughts don't define us, but they make us feel a lot of things. And it's the feelings that I'm seeing water really interested in picking up on. Water is wild, you know. This is a relationship not about controlling it, not about telling it what to do, not about expecting it to do what you think. Because as soon as you expect water to do something, it'll do something different. There is no, this is not, my work with water is more about me being just open and curious to see what it will show me, what it wants to do, how we play together. Not about, oh, well, if we do this, then water is automatically going to do this. No, water isn't. We as people can be unpredictable sometimes. Sometimes we can be very predictable. but on the whole, there is a wild aspect to all of us somewhere in there. And nobody wants to be experimented on. Nobody wants to feel controlled. Those are horrible feelings. So I always say, do to water what you might want done to you. And so that's why I don't use the word experiment I don't consider myself to be experimenting. I consider myself to be playing with an intelligence of which is responsive to me and can share things with me that I could have never imagined. So when I was studying this man, who was a scientist, he was also a psychiatrist. His name was Gennady Krokalev back in the 1920s. He was working with patients who had mental disorders and were having hallucinations. And he wanted to see whether or not what they were having visions of were somehow within the realm of possibility able to be captured on camera. Whether they were in a secondary consciousness, like a subtle realm, or whether their thoughts were in the brain were being then, that information was sent to the retina of the eye, and the retina of the eye recreated into a picture form that pushed out a kind of holographic image. And that holograph, which we, in a more subtle realm, couldn't really be perceived with the human eye, but could be picked up by the camera. So what he did was he created these kind of goggle things, but took the lens out and attached this thing called a zenith camera, which had a long box thing coming out of it, and he attached the box to the goggles. So there was no outside light coming in. So as they had a hallucination, he took photos of their retinas as they were having this experience. He did this for over 20 years, over 200 patients, and over 117 patients. He was able to actually capture images in black and white photos, showed them, and they said, yes, that's what I'm seeing. So this was repeated within the last 15 years or so by more Russian scientists. But rather than using people with issues, psychological issues, they employed someone who could remote view. And what they did, they set the whole setup exactly the same. They found the same old camera, but they used a scuba diving mask instead without the lenses on them. And they wrote some numbers and some shapes on pieces of paper, and they went behind a wall. So when the person who could remote view was tuning in to what those numbers or shapes were, they would have then click the camera. And they were able to get the number one, the triangle, various things like that. So they were of the thought then that thoughts are in fact material in some way, which then that the secret about that was that it needed to be a very clear vision, not just, let's think about dinner and then we'll see dinner. Whereas I can think about dinner and sometimes I'll see dinner. So it is interesting how when you're doing this, it's all about the unseen forces becoming seen in some way. So with me, I think there is an information transfer using thought and electrical charge and light that is transferred into the water, and that the water is able to absorb that. And because I freeze it straight away, and I'm doing it in the specific way, like I've just shared with you about that first freeze, we're seeing the information that was most picked up by that last thought. But sometimes water will just completely not do what you expect, and it will show you something that's like on the freezer behind you, or it will show you like something around you. And sometimes I've done a lot of repeat studies with my work, and sometimes it's so interesting because I could have these glasses that I'm holding up, and water might design the glasses, and then you'll do exactly the same thing, and it'll show you maybe something relative to the little words on the glasses, or it'll show you something from a different angle and perspective. So it's like it goes around showing you it understands all aspects of the glasses. It's very, very interesting. So with homeopathy, I think I was really interested in homeopathy because I saw it work when I was little. My mum took my sister to a homeopathic room. I was sitting in there, and my sister had warts all over her fingers, like all her fingers had warts on them. And Mum was given these little tiny white pills, and I remember that. So I was like, oh, these little white pills. Hopefully that works, because it was horrible for her. And I remember within 3 days, all her warts had gone, and it was just like miraculous. And I remember Mum going, oh, my God, these little pills, they're amazing. We have to keep going back to see the homeopath. And I didn't really understand how it worked, but because I'd seen it work and because I'd been there, I was like, oh, wow, this is definitely something I want to use with my children when I have children. And I have done. My son recently broke his wrist. And because I'd done a study and shared it on social media, I reached out to a couple of the homeopaths, and I said, look, what should I give him other than arnica? And they said, well, give him arnica, and then asked me a bunch of questions and said, try this, give this. And so did all of that. He healed very, very well. And so I had already got that interest. And so I'm not a homeopath. I am a water researcher and a crystallographer. That's my specialty. But I have a very keen interest in it because it relates very much to work that I've done and work others have done. Can you see where it says the 6 patterns of egg albumin?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, fabulous. So, I mean, you might be wondering, what has egg got to do with homeopathy? But it's actually all relative when you put it together. So I have discovered that when you look at the egg albumin, there's 2 parts to egg white. There's the gloopy gelatinous part, and then there is a thinner part that is very similar to saliva. Now, when you freeze that similar part, particularly for free-range happy, healthy hen eggs, you can see 6 patterns, and I've identified them as the volcano, the feather, the weave, pollen, flower, and stars. Now, 4 of them I consider to be complex. It's the top 3, volcano, feather, and weave, and the one in the middle, which is flower. The stars and the pollen are kind of rudimentary. They're kind of very foundational. So when I have frozen caged hen eggs, the most patterns that they form are the 2 rudimentary ones, the stars and the pollen. You don't see volcanoes and feathers and weaves and flowers in caged hen eggs, not naturally anyway. So I just love this because you can just see how beautiful they are. When you start learning how to do this, I teach this in the advanced workshop, like how to freeze egg white in this particular way. You never really look at an egg in the same way again because you can see how much information is in there. And this is specific to all birds. So there are 6 patterns for all birds in that species. So my next step is to see one day whether I am able to get crocodile eggs or snake eggs that are not endangered or anything like that, to see whether or not there are specific patterns that are different than birds that occur in the egg albumin. And if there is, then this is information for the species. And I think this is extremely important work going forward. Now, I've put this together because I found it interesting. I have so many curiosities myself going on about like, well, that really reminds me of that. So I like to kind of compare things. So you can see that this kind of volcano shape looks very much like a limpet shell and how it looks. So I've cut these in half. So this is the egg white and here is the limpet shell.
Oh, yeah.
Almost hard to tell here. This is the egg white. These are feathers. See how this looks so much like star anise?
Oh, so
the brain coral is like, gosh, you know, it looks like brain coral. This is horsehair, how much it looks like horsehair. Here's this is sunflower. You can see how it looks like that. This is from a duck egg. And here you can almost think that this was one picture.
It looks like one picture. I cannot see where the divide is.
But it is divided in half. And this is the egg white. This is the sea coral. Amazing. So it's very, very interesting because what we're looking at here is the primordial soup. You know, it's so, so powerful that it can share these patterns. And this is me just basically talking about what I'd like to see in the future and perhaps a kind of crossover into morphic resonance as presented by Rupert Sheldrake, who I'm actually going to go and have lunch with when I go to the UK in a few weeks and catch up with him. I met him a few years ago and he's just such a lovely, lovely person. So healing by proximity, I did a study which I shared on social media and outside of homeopathy, it got the most shares. Mm-hmm. So just to put into context, the difference between free-range eggs and caged hen eggs, you can see there's a remarkably huge difference. Mm-hmm. Now, I decided to do something where I would put, this is the crystallography over here of a caged hen egg. You can see it's just got that one kind of brain type of pattern. And here is a beautiful free-range egg with all its complexity. By putting the caged hen egg next to the free-range hen egg overnight, when I tested that caged hen egg, you can see that it has improved significantly more than in any caged hen egg I'd ever seen in my life. Mm. And I have done like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of eggs. Now, when I shared this, people on social media were going, oh, yeah, but if you surround it with heaps of bad eggs, like it's going to definitely go bad. Yeah. And so I did that. So I took if we're going to use the term good eggs and bad eggs, it's what I'd like, but just so it's easier to say. I put the good egg in the middle and I surrounded it by bad eggs. And those bad eggs were all from the same batch. And the good egg was from a batch where I was able to use the control. And so over here you can see that the good hen egg, after sitting next to all the bad hen eggs, it didn't change structurally. This is the control of the caged hen egg. Now, these are all caged hen eggs. The closer they were in proximity to the good egg, the more complex their patterns were. I would say, by looking at this, that this was a free-range egg. Yeah. It has transformed itself completely. So given that these weren't fertilized eggs, it's fascinating that information was still pulled from the free-range egg and from the caged hen egg. It's really interesting because it may be meaning that the potential for life still seeks improvement. And my personal takeaway from this is that given by molecular count we're 99% water, is simply if we heal ourselves, we heal others. And so there is a wonderful information transfer explaining why we want to get close to people, that we just have a really wonderful energy. There is a healing in that. I've also done the same test with water, where I took tap water, which has these disordered patterns, and that's because I know the signature patterns of tap water. I can immediately identify it. Then I took the spring water, which created what I call a hydroglyph, which we probably don't have time to get into, but essentially they're ice symbols that I've identified I've had to repeat the tests over 50 times and seen the same symbol appear from using a specific word to say I know that it has a meaning and that it isn't random, and I have 36 of them. This is the hydroglyph for the lotus, which means purity or enlightenment. I will sometimes see that glyph in healthy, happy spring water. But what's interesting is when I left the two out overnight beside each other, this is the tap water, the same tap water that has vastly improved. It looks more like what I would see in freshly collected rainwater now. And over here, you can see that the spring water has improved by sitting next to the tap water. And that is because I think it has compassion and purpose. And you can see that now it has not just one lotus, but two lotuses, and together they have formed a heart. Now, this is important work by a man called Luc Montagnier. I met him before he passed.
Oh, he's an amazing man he did so much for homeopathy, and he only just passed this year, I think, was earlier this year, hey?
Yeah.
And he won a Nobel Prize for his work with AIDS.
That's correct. So he's no unknown scientist. He's pretty well known. And, it's always really sad to me that when scientists share something that seems almost unbelievable to other scientists, it's almost like there is, especially when you were kind of going into the quantum, it's like it can be problematic for them.
Oh, but it's crazy. He had such a great name and, he won a Nobel Prize, but then the second he started expanding his mind and going into quantum physics, they were all poo-pooing him. It's just unbelievable. That's, this brilliant mind. Suddenly his colleagues are turning on him. It's disgrace.
Unfortunately, it's not uncommon.
Yeah, no, it's a very common theme, unfortunately.
Yeah. But his work here is very fascinating. So essentially, he said that DNA can be produced from its teleported quantum imprint. So in this experiment, two neighboring but physically detached test tubes were placed within a copper coil and subjected to a very low frequency of 7 hertz. The apparatus was isolated from the Earth's natural magnetic field, so there was no interfering. One tube contained a fragment of DNA around 100 bases long, and the second one contained nothing but water. After about 17 hours, the gene fragment, according to Montagnier, was recovered from both tubes, even though one should have just contained water, which is so interesting when you even think about what's happening just by spending a lot of time next to someone in physical contact. What is happening when we're making love? All this kind of stuff energetically, like all these things, they're so relative to information transfer. Given that we are such sensitive beings. It's very, very interesting to think about. So this is my work that I've done with homeopathy. And I'm just going to read it through because I chose not to use distilled water for this work. And there was a reason why, which I'm going to get into. So here we have a small study I did on homeopathic remedies. My process was to add a couple of drops to a certain remedy into specifically collected pristine spring water, and then I'd freeze it using my method of short-term crystallography. Lots of people have asked me what dilution I had. It was like 100. It was the most diluted I could find for all of the remedies. For all these tests, the water was prepared and frozen within 30 minutes of collection from the aquifer. So why didn't I use distilled water for the study? Distilled water is considered to be so pure and all these kinds of things. Well, it was because I feel that spring water holds similarities to the human biosystem. These remedies are taken orally, and the human's body is a complex salt water system. I wanted to see how these remedies performed in an energetically dynamic environment with not too much salt and mineral content like in seawater, but not too little, and still retaining the energy of movement and flow. Because I just collected it, it still had the energy of the movement, of the vortexing. That's why we tend to give the term, although it is another label, which I don't really like, but for now, we tend to call spring water like living water. So as I was saying, I've also found that the naturally dissolved salts and minerals in the spring water help store information longer, and the water is very alive and receptive to anything I add. These salts are not present or barely present in distilled water. So when I have used distilled water and added homeopathic remedies, I've found that the results were not nearly as clear.
Oh, interesting.
So I think of distilled water as an observer, because it lacks those minerals, not judging, not doing. And spring water is more of an active participant with the ability to observe. So also experience, but also experience and make memories like we can. So given the dilution process of homeopathy, I believe that water is not only storing the trace elements of the original plant or remedy, but also holds the spirit or energy, if you prefer, and potential essence of it. So all my work is based on my 9 years of observing water and my understanding of its nature. I'm not a traditional scientist, clearly, and my methods are unconventional, but I personally think they have great value. Now, I have done some repeat studies, not a lot so far, because I'm working on a number of things at once at the moment. But as you can see, they have the first two here, Arnica and Allium cepa, they are very, very similar. They are all very similar, but those two particularly. Milk thistle is really interesting. You can see that there is
the
thistle plant in there. And so I think that it's interesting because with the imagery that I've got so far, the results in the ice look very much like the plant or what the remedy was and what it looked like. So doing the repeat studies, I think, helpful for others to see that they're not just kind of random as well. So I think I was talking to someone and this kind of just came through me because I think it's powerful. I think that one of the reasons the higher dilutions are so potent is that the spirit or essence or energy of the plant or whatever it is closest to its essence, like a spirit transitioning from the physical body into the ethers. So one of the things that I talk about, and I'm mindful we probably don't have much more time, is that I think there are two types of water in people. And as you probably know, the Maori word for spirit is wairua, meaning two waters. And so there is the physical waters, and I think there are the spiritual waters. Now, because there is water in the air, the fact that we breathe, we're creating water in the air. Now, we often don't think about water in the air because we can't see it. So much of what we experience in the world is through what we see, even though our eye lens is 99% water and we're actually seeing everything through the lens of water. And we don't actually see with our eyes, we see with our brain. But aside from that, one of the things that I think is just so interesting is that when we really kind of going into this aspect of the spirit, I suppose, the spiritual aspect, is that the physical waters are hydrating us, they're maintaining us, but this essence water within us, the observer, I think of water in its most powerful sort of expression of being the observer. So we as human beings experience the world very internally. There are two worlds, the one we live on and the one we live in. So everything we experience in this world is felt and experienced through our senses, through touch, through taste, through sound, through sight. But all of these things we're actually bringing into ourselves. So the taste is felt inside, the eyes are bringing in vision, the hearing is coming in. All of these things are bringing into the body. So what do we actually ever experience outside of this body? Well, one of the things we can do is observe ourselves. So how do we do that? Well, I think that because of our electrical charge, and because not only from the electrical charge from our organs, we are not salt, we're salt water, we're not fresh water. Salt is a crystal, it gives off piezoelectricity. So there's a weak charge just from that. So I think that the water in the air is attracted to the electrical charge that we have. And that enables us to actually have this web around us that picks up information in the air and from others, and also that we ourselves can give off information about ourselves. So when we meet someone and even without touching them, we can feel like, oh my God, I feel like I know you, you feel so familiar. Well, there's so much energy exchange going on, information exchange going on. But one of the reasons we have that kind of love at first sight was like, that lightning bolt, as some people call it, is that we have our own patterns, our own individual patterning based on our energy and all these different kinds of things with this kind of web that I'm talking about. And each person's is individual. When you meet someone whose web kind of matches yours and very, very similar patterning, there is an immediate liking for that person. There is an immediate remembering of that person and this feeling that kind of comes up. So it's an extremely important piece. So when you recognize that we have this ability to kind of then come out of our body, so I think this essence water is either potentially a gas, or maybe it's some kind of a fluid that can come in and out, like from a liquid to a gas. There's so little we know about water. We think we know a lot, but we really don't. There are something like 300 different types of ice. The secrets to life are in the subtleties. And every single aspect of one of those areas of ice, of those 300, will be probably 1,000 subtleties, if not more. And that goes for liquid. It goes for, all the different other aspects of the different stages. And so I think it's highly likely and highly possible that we've only identified 4 stages of water. I think there are probably many, many more that we just are not able to discover yet. We don't have the technology yet. However, I think that spirit, or our essence, our soul, if you will, this electrical charge that we have is kind of like the silver thread. And it can go for far, 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 far further than we can even imagine, especially if we're very, very kind of open and loving. Now, I've been very curious, is water conscious, or is my consciousness affecting the water? And in the very early stages, I knew less, and I would have said the latter. But actually, more and more and more, I'm beginning to see that water has an intelligence that is not only responsive, but intelligent and sovereign. So I thought, well, how can I somehow see if water is actually conscious or not, or if I'm affecting it? When am I not conscious? So I was like, well, when I'm asleep, I'm not consciously impacting water. And so I did a study for a few months where I would leave a petri dish of water by my bed, and with the intention that maybe I'd pick up some part of my dream. And I sleep in the dark, complete darkness. So this was happening in the dark. And so what happened was that I would have a dream, and I often dream, but I often forget what I dream too. So I used the ones that I forgot. So in the morning, I would wake up. I knew I dreamt something, but I couldn't remember what it was. I would freeze it, and the image in the ice was so clear that it would literally jog my memory of the entire dream. And I'm like, okay, well, how can water possibly be accompanying me in my dream time? Where is it? Like, how is this possible? And so I saw that so much that it was like undeniable that there was information going on here, that it was somehow viewing this. So in the same way that people can do kind of astral travel and things like that, they have somehow left their body, but they're still they can come back to their body. And I think that this electrical charge aspect is one of the ways. So I've interviewed a number of people that have had near-death experiences, and it's wonderful to be able to talk to those people. They've been to places that we can't remember or haven't been to. And so all of them said that they had this sense of rising. And then 3 of them told me that when they looked down at their body being resuscitated, they had no connection to the physical whatsoever. They said, oh, I hope that person will be okay. They had become the observer, which is so interesting, because that, again, is what I actually think the essence of water truly is the observer. Now, when it's in a physical body with all of our salts and minerals, that is where we become like an active participant, and we're able to store memories. We are bodies of memories. Our entire life is a memory. We began this, it's now a memory. When you share this is going to be a memory for us. And so we look back at our lives and we pick and choose the memories we want to think about and focus on. They're often the clearest, that were most impactful to us, good and bad. And so we are making memories all the time. So it's interesting, because when you transition out of that and out of the active participant and into the observer, it's a very, very different energy because it doesn't come with any judgment and it's not coming in with any labels. So it is a very interesting and different perspective to look upon. So
a lot of magic that happens there for sure. Veda, I could chat with you all day long. This is so fascinating, and I know our listeners are going to be loving this. I know you've got a book, Secret Intelligence of Water, and people can purchase your online course if they want to. Well, you've got a few courses if they want to learn how to do this for themselves, and I hope they do, because the more we can have this verified and the more people we can get onto this, the more interesting it's going to become. So can you just quickly run us through how people can get hold of you and all the different services that you offer?
Sure. Well, my book is no longer available, unfortunately. My publisher went bankrupt, so whoever's got copies now have the last few copies. So
I know.
But everything else I'm doing, I'm going to put the book out myself and update it and do another one in a year or so. But I do all my online courses, and people can just get the PDF of the how to do it guide if they would prefer to do that. There's a load of podcasts on there. I share daily.
You've got a lot of podcasts that you've been on, and you've got a great Facebook group as well.
Yeah, and quite a growing Instagram group as well. I only just started Instagram a year ago, so I don't know why it took me so long to get into it.
It's me too. I think it's our generation. Hey, because I was very resistant to Instagram. I was like, I don't get this thing. I just got the hang of Facebook. Don't make me go somewhere else. And I am not, like you heard it here, I'm not going on TikTok. I refuse. Or any of the other ones. Don't make me.
I just have to push through my uncomfortableness and all kinds of places in my life and just go for it. But we always end up working it out in the end. But I post daily on Instagram too. And so that handle is Veda Austin _water. And I'm sure you can share the links. But
I'll do the show notes.
I will share one last little thing that I normally would only share in my advanced workshops. But I think because your focus is on homeopathy, I think this is really, really helpful. And my children taught me this. So when I was doing all this crystallography, and I'd get a particularly pretty one, my daughter Shanti, she would come up to me and she'd say, "Oh, can I have that, Mummy?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, okay." And I'd give her the dish, and she would start eating the ice. And I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she said, "Oh, it's good for me, Mummy." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then about a week or so later, my son Rama asked exactly the same thing. And I said, "Oh, did you talk to Shanti?" And he was like, "No." And I'm like, "Oh, all right." So they were really attracted to eating the crystallography. And I'm like, I wonder what that's about. And so as I started to share this with people that were doing the technique, they said, "Oh, my children have been doing that too." Some people in America and around the world. And I'm like, what do these children know that we don't know? So my partner, he did a study on plant medicines using words and my crystallographic technique. So he would write the word ayahuasca, he would write the words and their psychoactive ingredients like DMT and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, long story short, for a week, he was writing the word ayahuasca, and then he was doing the crystallography, and then he was eating the ice. So again, I've said this before, but water doesn't read words like we do, but it reads the energy of words. So what we're actually seeing in the crystallography is the manifestation of the energy or the spirit of a word. It's very powerful. And so he started to eat this ayahuasca ice. And after a week, he said to me, I think I need to start taking this seriously, because he was starting to have some experiences. So as I started to slowly share this, I've had a few people, actually, it's amazing how many people have insomnia. And there was one lady that got back to me. She started using the word rest as her word, and then eating the ice afterwards. She did it 3 times a day, and she got back to me around day 10 and said that she'd actually started sleeping. So I don't know. This is like really, really, really early stages, and you do need to know how to do my technique, but it's so powerful.
It's very homeopathic, actually, the principle. And you know what is very funny is literally yesterday in my closed Facebook group, I did a live because I have been taking the homeopathic remedy made from ayahuasca. And I actually just shared about this in my group just yesterday.
Well, there you go. That's very timely there.
Just no coincidence ever. Hey, it's just, this is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, Veda, thank you so much for your time. I am going to have all the links in the show notes, and I really encourage people to do your course and check out your Instagram. And, you know, when you're publishing your new book, and, you know, even that happened for a reason. It's going to be really interesting, like a year or so down the track, seeing why this has happened, because I am 100% sure this, you know, that publisher going broke had to happen because something amazing is going to come from this. It's going to blow your mind. So, yeah.
Oh, I never have any worries about things like that. It's just one of those things. I mean, books kind of give you a wonderful platform to speak as well. And now I feel like, there's always a reason for it, like you were saying. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me.
It was wonderful to have you on. Thank you so much.